From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's what's ahead. From the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen is back with us to comment on another recent court decision right here in Kansas involving a family dispute over a farm estate. This time, the handling of a trust's assets by the designated trustee was brought into question, and Roger will tell us how the court ruled on this and why. Then K-State's Mike Tokach will have the rundown on the university's 2020 Swine Day, a highly popular informational event for hog producers. It'll be held virtually this year in mid-November. And awaiting with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas, K-State's Gus Vander Hoeven, and more, here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is Agriculture Today. Glad to have you tuned in once again. We'll start with our regular look at what's going on in the field of agricultural law. For joining us once more via phone is Roger McEowen, professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. Roger, we've talked time and again over the years about the high importance of farm estate planning, and estate issues often make the courts. We have a case that took place here in the state of Kansas we want to look at today. But first of all, we should talk about the basics of trusts and how they can be structured in various ways.
Yeah, good to be with you, Eric. I would say initially that it's bad estate planning that tends to get people into courts. A court is where we want to avoid being when we do estate plans or tax planning for people or succession planning, business transitional planning. We want to do it right to avoid conflicts amongst family members that would end up causing the family to be in litigation against each other. And trusts are an important part of an estate plan for many people, and for various reasons. Now, one of the things I fear that happens more often than it should is that we have people come to us as practitioners and they will say, I want a trust. And for various reasons, maybe they've read something in a farm magazine or they've attended a trust promotional seminar. But they get this idea in their mind, yes, I need a trust. They tell their practitioner, I want a trust. So the practitioner says, oh, okay, you can have a trust. And they pull some boilerplate language off a shelf and the client has a trust. And client doesn't understand how it operates, doesn't understand what it does to them or for them, and it hasn't been explained to them. And there's never really been an analysis done for that client as to whether that's the appropriate approach to take with respect to their particular estate plan to accomplish their goals and objectives. And there is no one size that fits all. Everybody's facts are different. Everybody's family situation is different. Their land holdings are different. Their assets and liabilities are different. And so you really have to take the time as a practitioner to sit down and analyze these things before you can draw a conclusion as to what is the best approach to carry out the client's wishes. In this case we're going to talk about from northwest Kansas, a lot of that background work really wasn't done, and it led ultimately to a problem, and you have family members suing each other in court over an estate plan that went the wrong direction.
Well, let's leap right into the details here. This, again, a Kansas case, and in effect, it tested, Roger, how much latitude a trustee of a trust would have in administering it, and a couple of principles were in play here as far as the kind of trust that this was representing.
Yeah, we can have various types of trusts. What was at issue here had to do with what a discretionary trust is, and often we compare a discretionary trust to a support trust. Now, a support trust is where the trustee's responsibility is to provide for the beneficiary's support. So we want to provide food, clothing, shelter, those types of basic necessities. That's the responsibility of the trustee to take care of the beneficiary with respect to those things. Now, discretionary trust, on the other hand, is a trust that's been set up to benefit one or more beneficiaries, but the trustee is given full discretion as to when, if any, trust principal or income is to be given to the beneficiary. So it's completely within the trustee's discretion to disperse amounts out of the trust. And you compare that to the support trust, where there is the obligation of the trustee to take care of the beneficiaries to maintain their support. In this most recent case that was decided by the Kansas Court of Appeals a couple of weeks ago, the trust had discretionary language in it. It basically said that the trustee has full discretion with respect to trust income and or trust principal, and it was up to the trustee to determine when, if any, of those amounts or assets of the trust would be distributed to the beneficiaries. And the trustee was one of those beneficiaries named in the trust. It was Mom that set up the trust. Mom was the surviving spouse, sets up the trust for her 5 kids. And she's got farmland in a couple of counties north of Hayes, and she's got cattle, she's got farm machinery, and she has oil and gas interests. Now, one of the children, one of the boys, was to be the farmer. He was to get the farm assets, and the others were not to have the farm assets. So there was some deeding of land to that son outside of trust before death, and then one other brother, after Mom died, deeded his interest in the land to the one brother that is serving as the trustee that is to be the farmer. So he ends up with all of the farmland. He owns it individually. He put his wife's name on the deed, so they have the farmland. Now, he's also the trustee of the trust that has this fully discretionary language in it. And in fact, it said it gave him uncontrolled or exclusive discretion over trust net income and principal. And it provided specific authorization for the use of the trust income and principal. And it also said that he was to, quote, only act in a fiduciary capacity and shall each year render an account of his administration of the trust funds hereunder, so forth and so on. So all he had to do was give an accounting if somebody requested it, but he had full discretion to handle those trust funds and trust assets as he saw fit. And, of course, the big asset in that trust were the oil and gas interests that Mom had during life that she had put in that trust. Mm-hmm. And that was producing a lot of income. The question he had was, well, can I do whatever I want with that, given the fully discretionary language of the trust?
As a matter of fact, he took that to the extent that the receipts from those mineral leases were deposited in his personal account, and that's where this starts to get dicey, Roger.
Yeah, he completely depleted the trust, and it was about $1.3 million in oil and gas interests, and he paid off the land debt. So he took it all out, and he paid off the debt that was on the farmland that he owned individually, completely depleting the trust, leaving nothing for any of his other 4 siblings that were also beneficiaries of that trust. And his argument was, well, it's a discretionary trust. I can do with the trust funds and the trust assets whatever I want.
So those siblings obviously disagreed, and they took this to court. The initial trial court ruling, well, that was an interesting take, you say.
Yeah, the trial court judge said, well, yeah, based on the trust language, you can do whatever you want with it, and so that's fine. You didn't commit a fraud. You didn't breach any type of duties because the trust allowed you to do that. And so too bad, so sad for the rest of the beneficiaries. They lose.
But on appeal, it was found, you say, that trustee did not have carte blanche, absolute discretion in administering, in this case, the assets of that trust.
Right, and I can't, it's hard for me to imagine, when I first read this case, it's just hard for me to imagine a trial court judge missing some basic fundamental points of trust law as badly as was missed in this case. You cannot, under any circumstance, override statutory trust law under state law, and in this instance, the Kansas Trust Code, by putting provisions in a trust that violate those rules. And what I'm talking about there are the fiduciary responsibilities that a trustee has, even with a discretionary trust, to act in a certain manner toward the other beneficiaries. You have, one, a prudent investor rule. Secondly, you've got a duty of loyalty. And then third, you have a duty of impartiality and prudence. And all of your conduct, even though you have discretion over the trust funds and resources, those assets in the trust, you still have those fiduciary duties that you owe to the other beneficiaries. And indeed, the trust language was very clear in saying that the trustee was to act in a fiduciary capacity with respect to decisions made concerning trust assets and income. And so the Court of Appeals in Kansas unanimously reversed the trial court and said this was an absolute breach of his fiduciary duties he owed to the others. Now, the tricky thing is going to be on remand back to the trial court is how you put, so to speak, the genie back in the bottle. Mm-hmm. The trust funds have already been depleted. Those funds have been used to pay off land debt. Those monies don't exist anymore other than that they've been capitalized, so to speak, in the land that he owes. So I don't know how you unwind that other than requiring the sale of some or major portions of that land to disperse to the others. Maybe they can reach some other type of solution or settlement agreement out of this. But this is an absolute mess, and I think it stems again, I go back to my opening comment, it stems again from the trustee not, I think, reading between the lines, not having been properly advised as to what that trust language meant. Mm-hmm. I've seen this happen over and over, and again, I don't know for sure with respect to this one, but what I have seen, because I've had to unwind some of these in the past, what I have seen is a client have a misunderstanding of some estate planning documents that have been prepared for them, acting in a manner that they think is correct but is inconsistent with what is actually allowed. And then you have to do two things. One, you have to educate the client, and then second, you may have to correct some drafting errors if you can. It's pretty tough to do that post-death, but pre-death, correct the drafting errors and straighten out the estate plan. This is a case that should have never occurred. We should have never gotten a trial court opinion the way we did, but that's why we have appellate courts.
Well, as you'd expect, listeners, Roger has written up an article on this very case in his blog. Does a discretionary trust remove fiduciary duties a trustee owes beneficiaries? washburnlaw.edu/WALTR is where you'll find that. Roger, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
He's a professor of agricultural law and taxation out of the Washburn University School of Law. That's Roger McEowen. We'll be back with more for you on this Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Agriculture Today continues now as we give you an advanced look at what is every year a highly important event put on by Kansas State University on behalf of the swine industry. The 2020 Swine Day out of K-State is set now, and it's going to take place on Wednesday, November the 18th and 19th, which we'll explain in just a moment. Joining us is K-State Research and Extension swine specialist Mike Tokach to fill us in. Normally, Mike, Swine Day is focused on a single day, but you've spread it over 2 now, and that's for what people have probably already figured out are obvious reasons, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, we've had to make the decision, like so many other events that have happened here in 2020 with COVID, that we needed to move it to a virtual Swine Day. And we know from our experiences with some of the other conferences and many of the ones that we've attended ourselves that sitting in front of a computer for 4 hours straight to listen to presentations gets a little bit long. And so we're going to split up the presentations and do it over 2 days from 10 to noon on Wednesday, November 18th, and Thursday, November 19th for the program.
So the same high caliber volume, but spread out a couple of days.
That's exactly right. And, Swine Day is really a highlight for us. And I know we have a number of our producers and certainly our allied industry that attend every year to try to get updated on the latest research that we've conducted at Kansas State. And that's not going to be any different this year. We're going to go through all of the results that we've had of research that we've conducted over over the previous year and all the highlights of some of the things going on in the industry, and really focus on, like we normally do on the nutrition side, but also talk a lot about the feed safety and the feed milling side that is so important to the research that we do here at Kansas State University.
And in fact, that's how you formatted this one day to the next. Once again, Wednesday the 18th from 10 until noon on each day. And let's give folks a bit of a flavor of each of those days, what they'll provide. That focus on applied swine nutrition during the first day, the 18th. You've quite a lineup of topics there, Mike.
Yes, what we've got it set up is we got 15 to 20-minute presentations back-to-back on each of these mornings, with that Wednesday being about the applied swine nutrition side. And we're going to start the program off with Jason Woodworth highlighting the research that's been done over the last few years to summarize that whole area about how we feed sows immediately before farrowing in terms of trying to reduce stillbirth rate and to improve survivability of the piglets shortly after birth. We know that that's a major portion of the losses that we have in a swine operation are right around the time those pigs are born. And so we've done a lot of research in that area, plus some research that's been done by other producers out in the field and by some of our colleagues at other universities. And Jason's going to tie a bow around that whole area and help producers understand exactly how they should feed sows during that period. After he finishes, I'm going to talk about minimizing nutrient disruption around the time of weaning. And we know that pigs go through a period of time right after weaning where they don't want to eat very much feed, and that leads to a lot of problems for us in the nursery, and it ties not only to mortality, but morbidity, and some of the reduced pig performance that we see. And so I'm going to summarize the research that's been done not only at Kansas State but around the world that is focused on what we can do in the farrowing house and then also what we can do after weaning to try to increase feed intake of those pigs in the early nursery, and again focusing on how do we reduce mortality in that important time period.
So since you're presenting on that, can you give us at least one of the options there that might address that issue?
Yes. Well, we've known for a long time that things like creep feeding are important to increasing the pig's adaptability to seeing that feed before weaning and also after weaning. But I'm also going to talk about some of the pig socialization where we put litters together maybe before weaning and socialize those pigs before they go into the nursery and how that helps them adapt to the feed more quickly. So that's just one area, and it's an example I'll talk about. There's been some really exciting field research that's gone on in that area. One of the producers in Minnesota, Mark Schwartz with Schwartz Farms, has been adapting one of their farrowing houses to where they pull the petitions between the farrowing stalls very early after the pigs are born and mix those pigs in the farrowing house, and that's really helped them with adapting those pigs to the weaning process also, plus some of the labor-saving things that it does for getting pigs weaned and moved from the farrowing house to the nursery. And so I'll just touch on that area in my talk, but I think that's a very exciting new area of research.
It'll be an informative presentation, and then you have other individuals coming in to round out that segment on swine nutrition.
Yes, Jordan Gephardt, one of our new hires in the vet school here at Kansas State, he got his PhD in swine nutrition with us, is going to talk about preparing us for a world without zinc oxide. Fortunately, we're not there yet, but in Europe and in Japan and many other countries around the world, they've had to adapt to not using zinc oxide as an antimicrobial in the nursery diets. He's going to talk about how we are going to trying to do some research to prepare us for that day. Bob Goodband is going to summarize all of the research that the rest of us aren't talking about, basically. And we've done a lot of work with how to slow down pigs in the era of COVID, what we're doing with new corn varieties as they come to market, some of the things on our branched-chain amino acid research, along with a plethora of other areas that Bob's going to do a rapid-paced research update. And then Joel's going to finish off the morning, Joel DeRucci, that is, with understanding and influencing pig body weight variation. We know that variation in body weights becomes a big issue for producers when it comes time to market the pigs, and especially those lightweight pigs that are the last ones out the door. And Joel's going to summarize some of the work that we've done during the COVID lockdown period to try to summarize and understand all the different areas of variation and what we can do to influence it.
Excellent. And, of course, you and all will be fielding questions from those participating in the day.
Yes, that's probably one of the highlights that we're excited about with one of the changes we're making from going from the in-person swine day. Anybody that's been there in the past knows that it's very rapid paced, but we also don't leave a lot of time at the end of the morning for question and answer. One of the things we're going to do with the online version is have more opportunity to field questions from the audience at the end of our presentations. And we'll stay and field questions as long as somebody wants to ask them, and since we don't have to break for lunch as a group quite as immediately.
Very well. And that's just the first day. Briefly here, Mike, the second of the 2 days will have the onus on feed safety and feed processing. What prompted you to go down this path?
Well, certainly we know that Kansas State has been one of the leaders in doing feed safety research. The work that's been done, not only in animal science, but also in the veterinary medicine, that knowing that feed has been one of the areas that we've definitely have identified as a way that pathogens are finding their way onto pig farms. And so that day is going to really summarize the first half of it, all the feed safety research with Cassie Jones, Jordan Gephardt, and Chad Polk, and Jason Woodworth, our feed safety team, and the work that's been going on in that area. We're going to follow that up with the feed processing discussions. Chad Polk being in grain science, and Charles Stark, excellent work that they've done over the years on feed processing around the pelleting, particle size, the different ways that producers can work with both their pellet mills and their hammer mills and roller mills on grinding their ingredients. And so they're going to be able to both talk about their research and then field questions that producers may have in those areas.
And K-State, to note, is blessed with extraordinary talent in feed processing, feed safety, and those folks will be front and center during that second day, Thursday, November the 19th. And as far as taking part, it's a sponsored program, so it's free of charge, Mike.
That's exactly right. We've been very fortunate. We have a number of our allied industry sponsors that have stepped forward, that have always supported us with being there at Swine Day with their trade booths, and they've decided since they couldn't be there in person, they'd still support Swine Day with providing us with sponsorship so that we wouldn't have to charge people for attending it online.
So really all one has to do to be part of either or both of these days is to go to a site and register?
Yes, go to ksuswine.org is the easiest way to find the registration button. Will be on the right-hand side of the screen when you go to that website at ksuswine.org. Or you can always contact Lois Schreiner, and Lois can get you registered. Lois can be reached at 785-532-1267. But the easiest way for most people will be just to click on the link online.
ksuswine.org is where you'll find that link. And, Mike, of course, these are busy times, so if for some reason one can't be a direct participant in either of those days or both, the 18th and 19th of November, you will be recording these sessions for viewing at a later date, right?
Yes, certainly we will have them recorded, and you can watch them at ksuswine.org. There'll be a link on that website after the event to be able to watch those back if you choose at that time.
Once more, it is a virtual Swine Day, but nonetheless, it's a quality informational opportunity, and that's what you're pitching to potential participants.
Exactly. We're going to still try to cover all the highlights that we always do at Swine Day, just doing it in a virtual format, again, over that Wednesday and Thursday on November 18th and 19th.
And fully interactive. Once again, bring your questions and be ready to talk with Mike and his colleagues about anything that's on your mind, swine producers. Get it on your calendar. Mike, thanks for the preview. Good luck with this program and pulling it off.
Thank you, Eric.
He's a swine specialist with K-State Research and Extension, is Mike Tokach, and one of those instrumental in planning this event every year, the 2020 K-State Swine Day. Highly popular event being conducted the morning of a couple of days, Wednesday, November the 18th, focusing on applied swine nutrition, Thursday the 19th, with the emphasis on feed safety and feed processing. From 10 to noon each of those mornings, do reserve your spot at this event by going to ksuswine.org as soon as possible. You're listening to Agriculture Today. After this break, we'll return with today's agricultural news headlines and more for you here on the K-State Radio Network. Please keep it right here.
Make hand washing a healthy habit everywhere you go. Wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially after going to the bathroom, before, during, and after preparing food, and before eating. If soap and water aren't available, use a hand sanitizer that has at least 60% alcohol. Life is better with clean hands. A message from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, Eric Atkinson with you. Now over to today's agricultural news page and these headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Because of the federal holiday on Monday, the USDA's weekly crop condition and harvest progress report were pushed back until one day later, so the information is available to us today. And here in Kansas, for the week ending this past Sunday, our topsoil moisture supplies pretty spare. 0% surplus, 28% adequate, and 72% short to very short now. Subsoil moisture at 0% surplus, 39% adequate, and 61% short to very short. The condition of the newly planted winter wheat crop around the state, that is planted, 34% good to excellent, 46% fair, and 20% poor to very poor. Planting is at 74% complete now. That is well ahead of the 56% for the 5-year average. And wheat emergence, currently 50%. That's ahead of the 32% average. Corn harvest in Kansas is 63% complete. That's near the average for the day. Soybean harvest at 40% done, well ahead of the 20% average. And grain sorghum maturity is at 88%. That's ahead of the 75% average. And the sorghum harvest is at 30% done. That's ahead of the 23% average. As for range and pasture conditions, then 32% good to excellent yet, 38% fair, and 30% poor to very poor. How far has the harvest advanced nationally? Well, we get the latest on that from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
Nearly all of the nation's corn crop is mature, and 41% of it has been harvested.
That, too, is ahead of the 5-year average of 32% and more than double last year's pace. Only 20% of the corn had been harvested by October 11, 2019. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen 1/3, 33% of the U.S. corn crop harvested, as we have had a very favorable harvest season.
That was USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey.
As good as the progress was for the corn crop, even better for soybeans, especially in terms of harvest.
Most of the nation's soybeans have dropped leaves, while 61% has been harvested.
Far ahead of the 5-year average of 42%. And nearly triple last year's pace, just 23% harvested on October 11th, 2019.
There was not much change in condition ratings for either soybeans or corn. This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Green Plains Incorporated continues to remake its company, this time exiting the cattle business that it entered just 6 years ago. The Omaha-based company announced yesterday the sale of its remaining 50% joint venture in Green Plains Cattle Company to a group of investment funds, including AGR Partners and Stepstone Group, for about $80 million. That sale was the latest major move by Green Plains in the past few years. The company also has been divesting some from the ethanol business as well. Green Plains entered the cattle feeding industry back in June of 2014 with the purchase of Supreme Cattle Feeders, a 70,000-head feedlot near Kismet. In southwest Kansas, Green Plains Cattle Company eventually became the 4th largest cattle feeder in the U.S., with a total capacity of more than 355,000 head in 6 feedlots in Kansas, Colorado, and Texas. The company says the proceeds from the sale and distribution will contribute to its shift toward high-protein process technology at its ethanol plants as its business emphasis. Now, this means that a pair of investment firms, again, AGR Partners and Stepstone, are now the owners of the 4th largest collection of cattle feed yards in the U.S. Back in April of 2017, Green Plains purchased from Cargill feedlots in Colorado and Kansas. That $36 million deal included a multi-year agreement for Green Plains to continue supplying cattle from the feed yards in Leoti, Kansas, and Yuma, Colorado, to Cargill's beef processing plants in Fort Morgan, Colorado, and Dodge City, Kansas. Now, Green Plains continues to operate 13 ethanol plants totaling about 1 billion gallons of production capacity. So far, that company has sold 4 of its plants. And poultry producer Pilgrim's Pride Corporation said it has agreed to a plea deal with the U.S. Justice Department to resolve price-fixing charges and will pay a fine of $110.5 million. A guilty plea by the second-largest U.S. chicken processor by sales will make Pilgrim's the first company to admit in court to what prosecutors have alleged was a roughly 7-year effort across much of the U.S. chicken industry to inflate prices. That coordination pushed up up poultry prices paid by fast food chains and other chicken buyers, according to prosecutors. Pilgrim said the plea agreement provides that the Justice Department will bring no further charges against the company. Pilgrims was charged with price fixing and bid rigging in a criminal information document the Justice Department filed late Tuesday in federal court in Colorado, where the company is based. Prosecutors accused the company of coordinating with other parties to suppress competition in the chicken market from 2012 to early 2019. Now, prosecutors often file such documents when they've reached a settlement agreement with a defendant. Pilgrims is expected to plead guilty to the charges in the coming days. Pilgrims, which is majority owned by Brazilian meat conglomerate JBS-SA, has been at the center of the U.S. government's wide-ranging probe of the $65 billion U.S. poultry industry. Current and former employees of other chicken companies, including Tyson, Claxon Poultry, Purdue Farms, and Koch Foods, have also been charged. And on a lighter note, 11 students were recently presented $17,000 plus in scholarships from the Kansas Junior Livestock Show. Sam Capone has more.
The Kansas Junior Livestock Show recently presented a total of $17,600 in scholarships to 11 students from across the state. These individuals have excelled academically in community service and in 4-H and FFA. Receiving a $2,500 scholarship was Lawson Collins of Chanute. Kara Riffle from Westmoreland was awarded a $2,000 scholarship. Students earning $1,800 stipends were Rachel Sebesta of Wilson and Madison Vaught from McLouth. Those receiving $1,500 scholarships included Clay Brillhart, Fort Scott, Clay Pelleton, Paradise, and Elizabeth Wright, Olsburg. Scholarships in the amount of $1,250 were awarded to Kylie Fox, Marquette, Abby Lillard, Abilene, Reagan Strommel, Wyona, and Bailey Wolfcool, Barrington. This is the 28th year for the Kansas Junior Livestock Show Scholarship Program, which has awarded a total of $490,500 to 348 exhibitors since its inception in 1993. The program would not be possible without the generosity of Cargill, Merck Animal Health, Seaboard Foods, Intrust Bank, Coonrod Family Foundation, Shane Prill, and Farm Credit Associations of Kansas. I'm Sam Capone.
And you're listening to Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
Don't ever make the mistake of saying to a child, "That's not a tree."
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
When asking a young child to draw a tree, they generally will draw an upright line and place a rough circle on top of it. Often, they forget to draw the horizontal line underneath so that the tree drifts on paper like a balloon. Don't ever make the mistake of saying to the child, "That's not a tree." No, in that child's eye, that is a tree, and that is what the child sees. The fact that the trunk is only one line does not mean that it is not a thick trunk. The fact that the round ball on top has no branches does not mean that the tree has no crown. It's all there. Can't you see it? Drawing a tree is not that easy if you really want to draw a tree. I will always remember the art class in high school where I drew a scene of a tree leaning over a sheep shed, as sometimes seen in the old country. Very romantic. Remember, this was high school, and I was a dreamer. I wanted to be outside. The art teacher came by and looked at the free drawing from each student, giving encouraging advice, sometimes placing his pencil on the paper and with a few lines reinforced or encouraged. I shall never forget how he, with a few added lines, made my tree come to life. It was amazing to me. I enjoyed that class. Sitting on the deck the other morning and having an early cup of tea, we watched the small yellow leaves of the locust tree, standing close to the deck, come floating down. At one moment, when there was a breeze, the small yellow leaves came drifting down as if it was snowing. I've watched it snow like that, big flakes. Seeing the leaves come down was a beautiful sight, all without any sound. That, too, was a reminder of snowfall, silent snow. Slowly, as the days go by and more of the leaves come sailing down, the crown of the tree reveals itself. I can now see where I should get the extension ladder and cut some of the branches to open up the crown. This is a thornless locust tree I planted as a seedling. It has grown well, and as a tree, it is very entertaining, as the birds use it to look for insects or just perch for a moment close by. It's one of the reasons why there are some low, dead branches left. Looking up through the crown, I can now see the blue sky again. And as the sun slowly rises as we turn, the golden leaves look even more golden. It's a sight we are enjoying while it lasts. I know it will take only one rainy day and the show will be over. All the leaves will come down. The abscission layer having closed food exchange from and to the leaves. No more photosynthesis for this season. But once all the leaves are gone on all trees, the oaks, the ashes, the maple, and the willows and more, then we can see the naked tree in all its glory. And when you look, you notice the difference in crown shape by the makeup of the branch structure. Obviously, the trees with weeping growth form, such as weeping willow, have down sweeping and hanging branches. But other trees may have strong, vertical, or upward growing branches. What is important is to remember that branch attachment will influence the strength of a tree's crown to withstand ice and snow load. Certain trees are known to have so-called weak branches, and we see it during the ice storm with the result of broken branches. It's something to keep in mind when selecting a tree for the home landscape, especially if the tree is a so-called specimen tree, standing singularly on the lawn or in the open parks. A bad storm can destroy the looks of a tree, and it always happens after the tree has grown into a beautiful specimen, shows its shape, and through the seasons is a show-off. It can start with the blossom in the spring, even with bud swell. Then the summer color of the green leaves, or even purple reddish when we speak of the Norway maple. Then the brilliance of fall color. It can be red, yellow, or orangey. It is the crown which carries this splendor. But there's more. Take a closer look at the bark, especially the trunk. The persimmon tree shows kind of blocky bark arrangement. The cherry tree has smooth bark, as some other trees have. When it rains, the rain runs down quickly. I noticed that the bark of my locust tree looks somewhat like a roof with rough laid wooden shingles. When it rains, large droplets hang down on the slightly curled tips of the bark. I also noticed that the nuthatches and the chickadees love to explore under the lifted bark and look for insects. Of course, the bark of the London plane tree is that beautiful gray, white bark. There are a few magnificent trees growing on campus. I should not forget to mention that as far as tree care is concerned, the help of a certified arborist who knows trees can be a great help to correct an issue and prolong the joy of a particular tree. But keep drawing trees, and as the child grows, add branches and leaves, all different leaves.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. This reminder before we go, if any given day you are beyond the listening reach of this station, you can still catch the live broadcast online by going to ksre.ksu.edu/news and then click on the Agriculture Today Listen Live link toward the left-hand side of that page. That is again ksre.ksu.edu/news for the live stream of our program. Meantime, please be right back here with us tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good day for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.